Welcome to this introduction to advanced analytics in healthcare. This is going to be just a high level overview of what we're about to go through and what is advanced analytics in healthcare. A simple definition would be advanced analytics refers to the use of sophisticated techniques to extract actionable insights from healthcare data. That's one easy, simple way to just get started as to what this is. It's things like combining predictive modeling, machine learning, NLP, LLMs to reveal actionable insights. So, those are some of the methods I mean in that definition. Driving patient centered impact is really the core of this. How can we impact the care for patients by using these advanced techniques on the available data? Leveraging multiple sources of data, it may be integrating across electronic health records, imaging, genomics, wearables information, billing information, history. There's even some pockets of using consumer information in this environment. But that's the high level, what is it for analytics? We are always trying to balance that tech against ethical considerations of are we using the data in a way that is appropriate. One way to think about are we actually doing advanced analytics, because that's the topic, right? Not just analytics, but advanced analytics. One way to evaluate that, because there's no clear cut definition. And you'll probably get frustrated hearing some people use the term advanced analytics for very simplistic analysis. That's just going to keep happening. You're going to have to get over it. But one way to evaluate for yourself, am I really doing advanced analytics, would be to come back to the very simple analytics maturity curve that you see here, that I think is actually a really good reference for have we covered the foundation and the basics before we move up into more interesting to me, but not always to the problem solver. But are we moving up into more advanced techniques? And so the bottom base of the analytics maturity model is what we call descriptive analytics, which is best characterized by that simple question of what happened. I cannot tell you the number of times that people want to leap right over this into the prediction, into something really advanced, without first covering, do we have the foundation in place? Do we know what happened? Is there good, clean data on the problem that we're solving? That is skipped so often, it is embarrassing, and it needs to be there in place before you even consider moving up this curve. But sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. What I want to point out here is that the advanced techniques are when we are gaining in difficulty of the technique, and hopefully we're also gaining in the value that we are providing. The other way to characterize this is we are moving up from hindsight, or looking backwards as to what happened, into insight and foresight. So into discovering something that wasn't apparent initially, and eventually discovering something before it happens, or predicting something before it happens. So base is descriptive analytics. What happened? Next step on the ladder is diagnostic analytics. So this is moving towards trying to figure out a cause, trying to attribute why a change has happened from the data. And it's best characterized by that simple question that's in the box number 2. Why did it happen? The why did it happen can be simple as to looking for trends, looking for correlations that we can just point out and share in the data. And often that's aided by context and understanding of the operations of the system, or whatever it is we're informing on. And it can already start to creep into really advanced techniques, like trying to get to something like causal inference through something like econometrics. That's a very advanced technique. I would absolutely consider it advanced analytics, and might be used in the diagnostic stage of this. The truth is, you'd be doing that sort of intense diagnostic thing for an econometric analysis for the purpose of getting to prescriptive analytics, to be honest, which is up the curve. So, sorry, we're still on 2. Why it happened. So this is a great framework to just readdress when you're analyzing and trying to understand a problem. Do I understand what happened? Can I attribute it to something as to why it happened? Then a next level to move to, if possible, is can we predict it? Do we know what is likely to happen? So this is where we hit more advanced techniques that can start very simple, even regression, simple regression. can be a version of predictive analytics. And you could think of that as an advanced technique if you're using it thoughtfully and appropriately. Um, and in predictive analytics, we are trying to know something ahead of time. Couple caveats here. Predictive analytics is often jumped to. People love to hit this because it's kind of sexy, it's fun to say, it makes it seem like we are doing really smart things. The truth is, I have seen so many stupid uses of predictive analytics. It's kind of nauseating. So, myself included, I say that out of respect for where I've seen it because I've been a part of this. Because it's so exciting and fun to jump to predictive answers, it's not always the right solution. Predictive answers should only be used when we will have the data ahead of time. That's issue number one. Folks will often say, oh, we could predict this. Let's just look at the diagnoses. Well, hold on. The diagnosis comes after it's coded and weeks after the patient has left the hospital. We're not going to know that ahead of time. So how are we going to use that to make a decision for their care while they're in the hospital? That's the first place it typically falls down. The second place it falls down, the most common place it falls down, is what are we going to do with that information once we have it? Is there actually a decision you're going to make or something you're going to do different if you have this information ahead of time? I've seen many predictive solutions produced with no decision to be made from them. So, two important things to be considering whether or not we should be climbing up the analytics maturity curve. But this is where we start to hit advanced. Advanced is somewhere between these. There's some advanced happening in diagnostics. You can do some advanced, interesting things in descriptive. But those are foundational and necessary. They tend to be more simplistic or can be more simplistic. And then we transition into what most people are thinking of when they think of advanced analytics in healthcare, where we are doing prediction. And hopefully, although less often because it's quite difficult to really accomplish, prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics is best characterized by that question of how can we make it happen? So we know what has happened in the past. We understand why it has happened. And we can predict ahead of time what we need to in order to take a proactive choice that will have a consequence we know about. So prescriptive analytics is we are making a decision before something happens and we know that we are avoiding it, or we're making a decision before the intended outcome is needed, and we know what the outcome will be based on the decision we're making because we've observed from the past that this is the case. So pretty advanced analytics. It is rare to be working in this realm, but it's the ideal. This is where we want to end up, that we are able to produce information before it's needed that can be used to make a differentiating decision. So this is the analytics maturity model. It's a really useful framework to consider, do we have the foundation in place? And is there extra value by climbing this ladder? There usually is, but sometimes there's barriers there that make it impractical or not quite the right solution, or some trade-off between those. All right, next. I wanted to give a little more substance because often analytics is thought of as a cure-all, that we've got a problem, great, let's get analytics on it so that we can solve it. But that will not always be the case. So I wanted to provide a framework for how to think through a problem, and then I'll give you some examples. I'll go through 4-ish examples of how would I think about a problem that's brought to me through this framework. So let me outline this framework of what problems should analytics be solving in healthcare. The first cornerstone is that the problem needs to have some measurable essence. You would be surprised, this sounds like a no-brainer, but you would be shocked at how often analytics is brought up or data is brought up for an issue that can't be measured. And so we got to be gentle with the folks that bring these things to us and just try to talk them through. Great, I hear the problem you're facing. Help me understand where data is captured on this. Do you know how we could measure this? Those kind of simple questions are what you need to use to pull out from the person with that you're working with, or yourself if you're tackling a problem, to figure out, hold on, does this have a measurable essence? So can we quantify and use and collect data on this in order to even consider a solution? So step number one, can it be measured? Step number two, do we have good data? Will there be an impact? Those are the kind of two questions that are in this step of the framework. So even if the incoming data isn't perfect, that doesn't mean we're done and dead in the water. It can still be valuable as long as we can show that there's a clear impact that can be made from using the data. So this is where we're trying to prove the worth, okay? So we have a measurable essence. We've established that. Great. Yes, we've got something we can measure. Now let's pick out the outcome we're trying to influence, and can we prove that measuring it and showing it is really going to help improve, or predicting it is really could really improve our performance on something. So the burden is on us to kind of choose wisely and show that there's an impact on the other side of this. So an example, let me just talk through a little more practical instead of abstract. An example in this might be that we are trying to improve length of stay. So we can measure that. We've got length of stay on patients. Now, let's say we are approached by a surgical practice that has quick turnaround in the hospital. They do a lot of procedures. Patients stay for a day, 2 days, and then they leave. That is measurable. We have good data integrity on it. But will it have an impact is the next part of that. So the questions here are not what is average length of stay, what would 25% reduction in length of stay cause? The question is a little more conceptual and practical. It is, all right, you have, let's say, 1,000 patients that come through the hospital every year, and 95% of them stay 2 days. Great. Let's talk about in those 2 days, what happens, and is it even possible that that could be accomplished in 1 day? That's the kind of more conceptual question that has to be answered. And maybe there's data that will help us prove it by looking at what are the orders that are accomplished during that stay? What are the labs that are taken during that stay? And when are they taken during that stay? If we can use data to show most of the analytical information collected on the patients happens in the first day, maybe we've got the starting point of a case to be made. Hey, look, we've got 2-day lengths of stay, but it looks like everything you're collecting on the patients are in the first day. Is there an opportunity, if everything looks good on day 1, to send them home with monitoring? That might be a possibility here that can be informed by data. But you may hear from your proponent, absolutely not. The second day is absolutely critical, and we see this evidence of patients failing when we don't keep and monitor them for this second day. The answer may also be, I've not thought of that before. Maybe that's possible, especially with new technologies. So that's an example where we have to start to use data to point out that there's a potential for impact here, that we could actually do something about this. Because the other side of that coin is, as you bring up this question to your problem solver, all right, 2-day length of stay. How necessary is that second day? They may say, it's non-negotiable. We need to monitor these things to have safety for our patients. That stops your problem solving for the most part right there, because we have something that's measurable. We have good data on it, but these are all 2-day lengths of stay anyway. We're not going to get it down to 1 for safety reasons. So analytics is not a good fit to solve this problem. That's not a population we should be focusing on because there isn't an impact to be had. So it's just sort of a more practical example of what I mean by impact. Next, this one is a frustrating one, but it's so real. Today, and this may continue to evolve, but today, analytics is best suited, that doesn't mean only suited, but best suited to solve problems where we can use methods that are explainable. So simple linear regression comes with an explanation. What factors are you using? How is it weighting those factors? Explaining how the data is used explicitly through the technique is a really big key to making solutions work for end users. healthcare is still early in its adoption and trust of analytics. And so building that trust is a tricky balance. You can sometimes do so by just proving accuracy and making sure that folks feel this will be good information. But I have seen over and over again, even with accuracy, a inherent distrust of analytic solutions. The best solution for that, the best remedy for that, has been for me explainability, because you're working with practical scientists. You're working with folks that are implementing science for the care of people. And it matters to them that they understand the choice that's being made and the factors and what information was used to make that choice. That's how their brains work. And we can do this with different analytical techniques, even advanced ones. So, it's really essential that your analytics not only produce accurate results, but also offer clear, understandable explanations of what they are doing. Final consideration that is usually infused throughout this is the thought about, do we have ethical access to the data we need to do this? Now, we might be able to do the best job of the problem we are working on by having 24/7 video monitoring of an individual, but that really could be invasive and a not appropriate use of the information. That comes up a lot in healthcare, but there might be times when that sort of monitoring on a really ill patient is appropriate and can be brought through to the patient for decision making of whether or not they want that sort of invasive solution brought. So we always have to be thinking about, does our approach have a sensitive use of the information that respects patients' values, that we are being good stewards of their trust, and that we have some compassion infused to how we're thinking about this, that we're not being crude and crass about how we're solving problems. So that's the framework that we use to understand, is analytics a good fit for this problem? And it's okay if the answer is no. And being a thoughtful person that can explain why analytics isn't a good solution is a really valuable person to be as well. All right, I want to take you through some examples to show you, like, how would I use this framework? How would I think through a problem if it was brought to me? Because it's usually brought to me in this high-level, simple way, right? Hey, I want to measure physician burnout with this administrative data. Here's how I would use that framework to think through this fit. Is analytics a good fit? Does it have a measurable essence? I would say yes, we can measure some things about physician burnout, how much they're working, how long they've been here, any characteristics about the physician through this administrative data lens. But it might be missing the point as to how is the physician feeling or experiencing their workload. So I might have to push back a little bit on if we're measuring the right things. Data integrity, yeah, there's probably pretty stable information about administrative detail for a physician, but we might not have accurate information on some of the other types of nuanced information I mentioned that would be more useful for burnout. Explainability is probably there. I think we can likely use the workload and how much they're doing, what they're doing, all sorts of different things to help explain a bit of how we're using the data to in a thoughtful, like, reasonable way to inform on this problem. So explainability is likely there. Ethical alignment is probably strong, right? We're trying to do our best to hopefully we're trying to do our best to decrease burnout and make this a better experience for physicians. That's a very valiant cause to be championing. So that's very good. But I would say, in general, at a high level, however, just using administrative data might really be missing the point and not addressing the root cause. So the conclusion is, while it might help flag potential issues and could be used at a high level, we might not really be able to explain the things that are impacting We can point to high level directional trends, and why not try? I mean, these are not yes no things. This is analytics could be a fit here. However, we're just going to have high level trends that might not be really pointing to the root cause. So that's the caveat that would be given with this sort of question that's brought to me. You're going to hate that none of my questions are clear yes, no, but that is the work that we are engaged in here, okay? The world is not black and white, it is gray, and you need to get comfortable at being helpful in understanding how gray it is. Okay, let's talk about this through a next example. Assessing patient-provider trust. Is it measurable? Maybe. This is a really tough one. I mean, you probably could get at something, but it would have to be done through something like a survey. And so I think next, most directly about the data integrity, do we really have data that we need? Surveys may provide data um, from patients about how much they trust a provider, but it may be difficult through a survey to assess the reasons or understanding the why trust is breaking down between a patient and a provider. But I don't think that means we don't try. I just think it's important that we recognize this is a need and try to infuse it into our survey to get good information on it. Without that, you're not going to have a clear and useful explanation of where and why trust is breaking down. And so it may be limited, but I still think this is important to pursue. Ethical alignment, can be really deeply personal. Some of these trust issues, it may even surface things you don't want to hear, but could be important. If you're doing this for the right reason to improve trust between patients and providers wherever possible, that's a very good thing to be pursuing. So my conclusion here would be analytics could provide that high level view of what's going on, what's changing in trust, and that's absolutely worthwhile to pursue. But it needs to be entered understanding we might not get to the explainability we need on the things that are breaking down trust between patients and providers. So we should look to infuse where we can that kind of information into a survey or whatever mechanism we're using to gather this to try to get to that explainability. Like that's the thing that's missing here in this framework, or not missing, lacking the most, or the lowest score, let's say, in the framework. So let's look for where can we bolster that? How can we bolster that? Let's go through another example. Evaluating the quality of end-of-life care decisions. Do we have a measurable essence here? Some aspects of this we can measure. What care was given, how long the process was, when did they get engaged. There's a lot of information that can be measured here, but the quality of that end-of-life care might be really difficult to get at in a quantifiable way. Even if some measurable proxies exist, they just might not. They would have some difficulty reflecting how each individual decision contributed to that quality of care. And there's probably many things that are outside of the decisions made or the care given or the things that are captured that can really affect this quality of end-of-life care. So I think you're really going to struggle to get to explainability. This is something that's difficult. It's very human. And this being done well is an amazing, beautiful gift you can give to patients. I'm just saying that analytics might be a really tough way to measure the impact. So that human dimension is really paramount, right? Analytics can only gather and inform on so much. And so my conclusion is measurement is probably possible, but there's a steep burden of providing the impact may not justify analytics only, right? So I think the impact is very big. This quality of end-of-life care going well is very important, but it's not always through measurable means. That's what I'd share. This would be the type of feedback I'd have to give if someone's bringing a problem like this to me. Okay, let's look at this. Analyzing surgical team dynamics and communication. This comes up often as, hey, we're having breakdowns in communication. We're finding often the root cause of failures has been communication items. This is part of working in large interconnected teams and trying to make that work properly. So is it measurable? Yeah, you can probably capture some metrics on this, right? Turnaround times. You could do something on the communication because we do a lot of that through the chart now, or we're trying to formalize it into the chart. You might even be able to monitor the procedure environment and quantify in some way through video or something else how much communication is going on. But there's parts of communication that aren't verbal too, right? So there's a big part of high functioning teams that has to do with history, context, other policies and procedures that are in place to make that work well. So you can do some metrics. You can get really advanced in how you record this, but you may miss some of the qualitative things that might be steeped in the sort of communication patterns of a team. And I think you're going to have trouble explaining some of how this translates into good communication or bad communication. So it's a great thing to be working on. Ethically, I don't see any concerns with gathering this information and trying to improve it. But we need to be honest and straightforward about how likely analytics is to provide all of the answers, right? Maybe some directional information. So this is like all of mine. And this is why I told you you're going to hate my answers. It depends. They all depend. And really, a lot of times the answer is pure analytics solution is going to help with high-level trends, flagging really poor performers or outliers. But without a strong, human explanatory narrative, the findings are just gonna fall a little bit flat, in my opinion. So that is the framework that's useful for determining whether or not analytics should be used as the primary item to solve, or is it just a piece of the puzzle in solving a problem that's being brought to you. Helping to illuminate this for a team can be really, really valuable. So the conclusion. So that's an intro with a framework of how to think about what problems to solve with advanced analytics. And this is just one piece of many we're going to go through. And so I'm happy you stuck with me this long. I'll summarize this section as this definition, right? Advanced analytics refers to the use of sophisticated techniques to extract actionable insights from healthcare data. The analytics maturity model is one way that we can think about the work we're doing and whether or not it's advanced. Important to remember, all of these parts are needed, and we don't always have to be worried about, I only want to do advanced analytics. There is so much value in the foundational parts of this model that advancing and making progress in those is extremely valuable, and especially when they're not in place. Jumping to advanced analytics without having the foundation in place is quite dangerous and a very bad idea, a good way to make yourself look very stupid. So know this entire environment and where you're working within it. Analytics is best suited for problems that have a measurable essence, good data that exists, that we can demonstrate an impact that can be had. An analytics solution can offer a clear, understandable explanation of what it's doing, and that we are doing so with respect for patient values, trust, and compassion. So that is my overview of what advanced analytics actually is in healthcare. Thanks for sticking with me this long. I look forward to seeing you in the next parts.